Montana Territory, August 1883. The knock came just after sunset, low and slow like a warning. Inside the weather-leaning farmhouse tucked against the base of the crazy mountains, Prudence Jarrett froze where she crouched beside the root cellar stairs, one hand gripping the fraying shawl around her shoulders. Her other hand pressed gently over her daughter's mouth. "Stay quiet," she whispered into the girl's tangled dark hair. "Like the foxes do." Little Lorna nodded under her mother's hand, eyes wide, green as spring wheat. The knock came again. Then silence. Prudence shifted her weight on the dirt floor. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure the man outside could hear it. Collectors. They had been coming for weeks now, first letters she could not read, then men she did not know, demanding money her dead husband had promised them. She had nothing to give. No livestock, no savings. Not since Caleb had gone under that wagon 6 months ago. There was only the house and her children. She closed her eyes. "I saw smoke," a man's voice called through the door, deep, steady, not angry, not looking for trouble. Prudence opened her eyes. That voice was not like the last one's. "I'm leaving a parcel," he said. Wood creaked under his boots. "Someone said the Jarrett place had little ones. It's just food. I'm leaving it here on the porch." She heard the thud of a sack on the boards, then footsteps fading. Still she waited. Above, her son Liam shifted behind a crate. He was 8, too old to be quiet, too young to know when to stop asking questions. She gave him a sharp look, and he returned it with a frown that made her heart ache. He missed his father. He missed everything. Only when full dark wrapped the windows did Prudence dare crack open the cellar hatch. She moved like a shadow across the kitchen. The door creaked as she opened it, and there it sat, canvas sack, tied tight, smelling of bread and smoked meat. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she looked to the horizon first. No one, just stars and wind. The next day the man came again. She saw him from the back window, tall, shoulders square, hat pulled low. He led a bay gelding with a limp and a saddle worn from long days. He did not try the door this time. Just left another parcel and rode off slow. By the third day, Prudence dared to watch from the edge of the barn. When he turned to go, she stepped out. "You should not keep coming," she said, voice rough from disuse. The man turned. His eyes were the color of river stone, and they narrowed slightly at the sight of her, as if weighing whether she was real. "Name's Elias Zane," he said. "No offense meant, miss." "I am not a miss," she said. "I am a widow," he nodded once. "All right," she waited. "Why are you bringing us food?" "Because someone should," he said simply. "And I can," she frowned. "There is always a reason. What is yours?" Elias shrugged. "I owed Caleb Jarrett. From way back. He helped me once when I was a boy, thought I would return the favor." Prudence stared at him. Caleb had never mentioned him, but she knew her husband had been a different man before he came west. "I cannot repay you, not asking you to." He tipped his hat and left. That night she sat by the stove, watching her children eat cornbread and beans like it was Christmas. She did not trust Elias Zane, but she did not fear him either. And that, after months of fear, felt like something. The fourth time he came, she met him at the fence. "You keep showing up," she said. "You keep not locking the gate." She looked down at her hands. "They came again. Yesterday, said they would take the house." Elias's jaw tensed. "How much do they say you owe?" $210. Her voice cracked. "Which may as well be 1,000. He looked at her a long moment. "Is it all on the house?" "Yes. And nothing else. They want the land, too, said it will go to auction." Elias looked out at the mountains. "Damn vultures. You should not get involved," she said. "I have nothing left for you to collect. I am not here for that." "Then why?" He hesitated. "Because no one should have to hide in a cellar with their children." Something inside her tightened. She turned away. "Come inside," she said. "If you want to." He followed her in. Liam stared at him like he was sizing him up for a duel. Lorna hid behind the stove. Elias crouched down, resting on one knee. "You must be Liam," he said. "Your pa ever teach you to ride?" The boy nodded slowly. "Well, I will bet you can outshoot most men already." Liam grinned before he caught himself. Prudence watched from the corner, arms crossed. She had not smiled in so long she had forgotten how it felt. But something about Elias's presence settled the room. He stayed for supper. Ate slow. Spoke softly, never asked about Caleb, never asked about her. When he stood to leave, she walked him out. "You do not need to keep doing this," she said, "I know." "Why do you?" He looked at her, truly looked. "Because I want to," she did not answer. But she did not stop him when he reached for her hand. The next morning, the debt collector came again. This one was crueler than the rest, with a red face and a voice like gravel. "You got until Friday," he snapped, slapping papers against the doorframe. "Then we take the land." Liam stood behind her, fists clenched. That night, Elias came back. They gave her until Friday, Liam told him before Prudence could speak. Elias nodded once. "All right." He left without another word. On Friday morning, Prudence stood on the porch, children behind her, watching the wagon roll up the lane. The man stepped out, smug and sure. Then froze. Elias was already there, arms folded, a folded banknote in his hand. "I am paying the debt," he said. The collector sneered. "You? Who the hell are you?" "Someone who has $210, in full." He handed over the note. The man snatched it, counted it twice, then spat in the dirt. "Fine. It is done." He climbed back into the wagon and left a cloud of dust behind him. Prudence stared at Elias. "You paid it," she whispered. "I said I would help. That was all we had. That was everything. I know. You do not even know me." He looked down at her, something soft and certain in his eyes. "I do now." She could not speak, could barely breathe. He stepped closer. "I do not expect anything from you." "I know," she said. Then, after a long beat, "But what if I wanted to give you something anyway?" He smiled, not wide, but real. "Then I would be a fool to say no." And for the first time in a very long time, she reached for someone not out of fear, but out of hope. Elias took her hand, and he held it like he meant to never let go. The days stretched easier after that. Elias didn't come every morning, but when he did, his horse's slow approach down the rutted lane became a sound Prudence no longer met with dread. She didn't wait in silence anymore either. She'd be outside by the time he reached the gate, sleeves pushed up, her apron dusted with flour or soil. He'd dismount without a word and follow her toward whatever task she had started, splitting firewood, mending fence, pulling onions from the earth. He didn't talk too much. That suited her fine. One afternoon, the wind picked up hard from the north and carried with it the scent of pine and rain. Prudence had just finished rinsing linens in the creek when she saw Elias leading his gelding through the gap in the fence, saddle bags full, and his coat dark with dust. He tied the horse loosely and stepped into the yard, pausing when he noticed the wash buckets. "You hang in those with a storm coming?" he asked. She brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. "I wasn't born smart." He tilted his head toward the barn. "Come on, let's string a line under the eaves." She followed him, arms full of wet fabric. Inside, the barn smelled of hay and old wood. The roof leaked in one corner, but he found a dry stretch near the back. He strung a length of cord between two beams using a bit of twine from his kit, and she handed him each sheet and towel in turn. Their hands brushed more than once. Neither spoke of it. Outside, the wind kicked up harder, flinging grit across the yard. Inside, there was only the sound of dripping water and the soft slap of linen drying slow in the dark. "You said you owed Caleb," she said finally. "But you never said what for." Elias leaned against the post, arms folded, eyes on the sheet as it swayed faintly. "I was 16. Got stuck in a mining camp near Helena, weren't doing right by the younger ones there. Caleb pulled me out, gave me a rifle, a mule, and a week's worth of jerky. Told me to ride south and not look back." She blinked. "He never said he wouldn't have." They stood quiet a long while. "You've been alone a long time," he said, not like a question. She nodded. "It changes a person." "I know." She looked at him then, really looked. His face was weathered but not worn down. He bore the world the way a mule bore a pack, steady, unbothered by weight, but careful where he stepped. "You don't talk about yourself much," she said, "not much to tell." "I don't believe that." He gave a small huff, almost a laugh. "I was born in Missouri. Father died in the war. Mother remarried a man who thought boys should work harder than mules. I left at 15. He paused. Spent the next 20 years not belonging anywhere. And now he met her eyes. I might be thinking on staying. The rain started soft, tapping out its rhythm on the barn roof. She didn't answer him, not with words. But she didn't look away either. When the storm passed, he helped her carry the dry sheets back to the house. Liam stood at the porch rail, watching them with that same wary tilt of the chin he always had. Elias nodded to him. The boy nodded back. Inside, Lorna sat cross-legged by the fire with a rag doll in her lap. Elias crouched beside her, careful not to startle. "She got a name?" he asked. Lorna glanced at her mother, then back at him. "Her name's Juniper." "That's a good name," he said. Strong. Prudence stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the way her daughter's shoulders relaxed just a touch. That night, after the children were asleep and the fire had burned low, Elias lingered at the doorway, hat in hand. "Don't ride too far tomorrow," she said, voice low. He looked up. "You want something? I want you to come back." He stepped forward slowly, like a man not used to being welcomed. "I wasn't sure if I belonged here," he said. "You do." He reached out, not touching, but near enough that she felt the warmth of his hand. "I've been on the trail long enough," he said. "I'd like to build something that doesn't blow away in the wind." She looked at him, her voice steady. "Then stay." When he leaned in, he didn't rush it. His mouth met hers like someone laying a promise down, quiet and sure. She kissed him back with the certainty of a woman who had learned not to waste anything, not time, not warmth, not love. After, he stepped out into the night. She watched him from the porch as he walked back to the barn, his figure tall and solid against the pale moonlight. In the morning, the children found him fixing the back gate. He didn't say it, and neither did she, but from then on, he never left at night again. The first frost came early that year. By late September, the grass along the north side of the barn crisped white by dawn, and the hens kept to their coop until the sun rose high enough to warm the yard. Prudence had taken to wearing Caleb's old coat when she walked the fence line in the mornings, the hem dragging in the dew. She hadn't packed it away. She hadn't been able to. But now, with winter pressing closer, she wore it without hesitation. Elias had built a woodshed behind the house, using split pine from a stand near the creek. He worked without talking, hammering slow and precise, his sleeves rolled to the elbow. Prudence watched from the porch as he measured the last plank with a piece of twine and nailed it into place. "You always work like that?" she asked, arms folded, breath curling in the cold. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to prove something to the nails." He looked up, one corner of his mouth lifting. "They don't argue back." She stepped down from the porch and walked to the shed, boots crunching over the frostbitten grass. She stopped just close enough that she could smell the sawdust on him. "You ever spend a whole winter in one place?" she asked. "Not since I was a boy. You planning to?" "I might be." She reached out and picked a pine shaving from his shirt. "That's not an answer." He held her gaze. "I want to be here if you want me to." "I wouldn't be asking if I didn't." He nodded, quiet settling between them like a blanket. Then he turned and began stacking the wood he'd split earlier that week, his movements steady and sure. She joined him without being asked, and together they filled the shed wall to wall. Inside, Lorna sat at the table tracing letters into a slate, her tongue poked from the corner of her mouth in concentration. Liam wasn't in sight, but his coat was gone from its peg. Prudence went to the window and spotted him out in the pasture, crouched low with Elias's rifle balanced across a log. "He's practicing," Elias said behind her. "He's too young. He's careful, doesn't shoot unless I'm watching." She turned to him. "You're teaching him?" he asked. She studied his face. "You think the world's still that dangerous?" "I think it always has been. He ought to know how to hold his own." She didn't argue. They stood in the kitchen, the quiet broken only by the scratch of Lorna's slate and the distant sound of the rifle cracking once, clean and far off. That night, Prudence stirred a pot of venison stew over the fire. The meat was from a doe Elias had brought down the week before, and the scent of it filled the room, warm and earthy. Lorna fell asleep in Elias's lap before the stew was done, her hand curled loosely around one of his fingers. He didn't move, just adjusted his seat so her head didn't slump. "She doesn't sleep like that with anyone," Prudence said softly. "She feels safe." "Yes, she does." Liam entered through the back door, cheeks flushed, boots muddy. He glanced at Elias, then at Prudence. "I hit the stump," he said. She raised her eyebrows. "You did?" "Twice." "He said I got a good eye." "You do, Liam." Elias's voice was low but sure. The boy stood a bit taller, then pulled off his boots and set them by the fire without being told. Prudence ladled out the stew and set 3 bowls at the table. Elias carried Lorna to the sleeping loft without waking her and came back down with his sleeves rolled again, hands clean. They ate in the gentle hush of a family that had begun to find a rhythm. No one said it aloud, but the shape of things had changed. The table was no longer set for grief. It held promise now. Later, after Liam had gone to bed, Elias stood at the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other resting at his side. Prudence joined him. The moon hung low and heavy, casting long shadows over the pasture. "I could build something out back," he said. "Separate but close." "Why? So I'm not under your roof unless you want me there." She looked out at the dark fields. "You're already under it." He turned to her. "You sure?" "Yes." He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. "I used to think I couldn't, that it'd be wrong to imagine something beyond survival. And now I think I'd like to plant more than potatoes next spring." He smiled, slow and full. "I'd like to build a porch swing. One of those wide ones. That sounds like something worth sitting on, only if you sit with me." "I will." They stood there a long while, listening to the wind move through the cottonwoods, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty but full of everything they hadn't said yet. When Prudence took his hand, she didn't do it tentatively. She did it like it was hers already, and Elias laced his fingers through hers like he'd been waiting all his life to do just that. By mid-October, the ground had begun to harden beneath the hooves of Elias's gelding, and the light slanted sharper through the cottonwoods. The days shortened with a kind of hush, as if the land itself were waiting for winter to settle its bones. Prudence had taken to rising earlier, beating the frost to the pump and bringing in water before Liam or Lorna stirred. She moved quieter in the mornings now, not from fear, but from habit, one that was slowly softening at the edges. Elias had started sleeping in the lean-to he'd built just beyond the barn, a modest shelter of plank walls and a pitched roof that held warmth better than it looked. He didn't ask to move into the house. He didn't question her pace. He simply stayed close, kept steady. One afternoon, as she repaired a tear in Lorna's petticoat beside the stove, Prudence heard the rhythmic scrape of metal from outside. She stepped onto the porch and found Elias sharpening the blade of a drawknife, seated on an upturned crate, a length of cedar balanced across his knees. "You building something?" she asked. He glanced up once. "A cradle," she frowned, stepping down into the yard. "There's no baby." "Not yet," he said, setting the drawknife down, "but someday maybe." Her breath caught just for a beat. "That's a bold thought." "I've had a few of those lately." She walked to him, the hem of her apron brushing the grass. "You sure I'm not too worn out for starting over?" "You're not worn out," he said. "You're weathered." "There's a difference." She sat beside him on the crate's edge, the cedar board between them. "What were you before this?" "Most recently, a trail hand. Before that, I worked for a cattle outfit near Bozeman. Drove herds east when the rail came through. Ever have any real place of your own?" "Once. A patch of land west of Fort Benton. Didn't hold it long. Water dried up and the fence posts rotted faster than I could fix them." "Why'd you never settle again?" He studied the grain of the cedar. "Didn't have a reason to until now." A breeze lifted her hair from her cheek, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she reached out and ran her thumb along the edge of the cradle board. "You ever built one before?" "No. But I've built wagons, and a wheel's more trouble than a cradle, far as I figure." She smiled, small and lopsided. "Well, if it tips over, we'll blame the baby." That evening, Elias stayed at the table long after supper, helping Liam sand a length of fur they'd salvaged from the old smokehouse. They worked by lamplight, speaking low, measuring twice. Prudence sat across from them, sewing a patch onto Elias's shirt where the shoulder seam had begun to pull. "You planning to keep him busy all winter?" she asked. Elias didn't look up. "Thinking it's better than letting him stew." "He doesn't stew," Liam said flatly. "You do," Prudence said without heat. The boy frowned, then looked at Elias. "You gonna teach me to break a horse this spring, if your mother says I can?" Liam turned to her, expectant. She gave a slow nod. "If your chores are done, and if you listen." "I will." Later, once the children were asleep, Prudence stepped out onto the porch where Elias stood looking up at the stars. The air had turned sharp and his breath showed pale against the dark. "You ever miss the trail?" she asked. "Sometimes." "But not tonight." She moved beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "You think you'll be restless?" "Maybe, but I'd rather be restless here than settled somewhere else." He turned to her, the porch light catching the lines at the corners of his eyes. "I've never had anything that felt like mine," he said. "Not really." She looked up at him. "You do now." He didn't reach for her. Instead, he stepped down from the porch and crossed the yard to the spot where he'd begun laying stones for a smokehouse foundation. He crouched, ran his hands over the frost-dusted rock, then stood again. "Come spring," he said, "I'll build it proper. You'll have hams hanging again, maybe even trade some at the falls." "I used to do that. Took a wheelbarrow 1 year. Came back with less than I left with." "You won't be going alone next time." She followed him down the steps. "You planning to follow me everywhere?" "No," he said, facing her fully now. "I'm planning to walk beside you." She looked at him a long moment, then leaned into his chest, her forehead resting just below his collarbone. He wrapped his arms around her, careful but firm, as though he finally understood she was not something fragile, just something worth holding. Inside the house, the fire hissed low behind the stove door. Outside, the wind settled against the eaves, and in the stillness between them, something old gave way to something new quietly, completely, without demand. They stood there until the cold bit deeper, then went inside together, her hand clasped in his like it had always known the shape of his. November came with low clouds and the smell of snow. The first flakes fell before dawn one morning, soft and uncertain, melting as they landed, but by mid-afternoon the pasture was pale and quiet under a thin white sheet. Prudence stood at the window, towel in hand, watching Liam herd the chickens toward the coop with a crooked stick. Lorna played in the corner with scraps of cloth, humming to herself, piecing together a quilt square with wild, uneven stitches. Elias stepped in from the cold, stamping the snow from his boots. He carried a small parcel in brown paper, the corners damp from his ride. "They got your order in from Livingston," he said, setting the parcel on the table. Prudence dried her hands and untied the string. Inside was a length of calico in a faded rose print, enough for a dress. "I wasn't sure if this pattern was still to your liking," he said, watching her. "I've never had any with color before," she said, running her fingers over the fabric. "Not since I was a girl." "Well," he said, "seems to me you've earned something not meant for work." She folded the cloth carefully. "I'll sew it after the chores settle down." He nodded once and went to hang his coat near the stove. Lorna looked up from her quilt square. "Is it for Christmas?" she asked. Prudence hesitated, then smiled. "Yes, I think it is." Outside, the snow continued to fall, steady now. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Elias brought in 2 chairs from the porch and set them by the stove. He poured a measure of molasses into a tin cup and handed it to her. "I was thinking," he said, "about the land north of the creek. It's flat enough to plant wheat. We'd need new seed," she said. "I can ride into town again before the freeze locks up the pass." She studied him in the firelight. "That's a long ride. Roads'll be worse by next week. I was thinking we could send word with the mail wagon. Ask to hold the seed till spring." He met her gaze. "I figured by now there wasn't any other way to say it." She didn't look away. "You'd really help plant it?" I'd help raise it. Same as I'd help raise what comes after, her breath caught, not from surprise but from the quiet certainty in his voice. You want to build something here that lasts, she said. I do. She leaned back in the chair, the warmth from the stove brushing her legs. There's a marriage license in the drawer, she said. Caleb and I signed it at the county office near Deer Lodge. I keep it because I didn't know if I could let go of it. I wouldn't ask you to throw away the past. I'm not, she said. But I am ready to set it down. He didn't move toward her, didn't speak for a long time, then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he took a narrow gold band, plain and unpolished. My mother gave this to me when I left Missouri, he said. Said it belonged to her grandmother. Every time I thought about giving it away, I didn't. I think I was waiting. Prudence held out her hand. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit without resistance. She looked at it a long time. When? We could speak vows here, he said. Tomorrow, quiet. Just us and the children. Or we can wait for the preacher to come through next month. She turned her hand in the light, the ring catching a faint gleam. I don't see any reason to wait. The next morning, Liam chopped kindling before breakfast while Lorna sorted the good dishes with a solemnity far beyond her years. Prudence wore her hair pinned back with a length of ribbon, and the calico sat folded on the table, waiting for her needle. Elias shaved at the pump, the steam from the basin rising in the brisk air as he checked his reflection in the window glass. They stood together near the hearth, the children on either side, as they spoke the words they'd chosen. There was no preacher, no witnesses but the wind outside and the fire burning low. But it was enough. After, Lorna climbed into Elias's lap and laid her head on his shoulder. Liam stayed close to his mother's side, but when she looked over, he gave a single, small nod. That night, they all sat together around the table, the oil lamp catching the shine of the ring on her finger. Elias poured cider into tin cups and passed them around. To your mother, he said, raising his cup, who taught you how to stitch straight lines. To your father, she replied, who taught you how to keep your word. Liam raised his cup next. To the chickens, who didn't die this week. They all laughed, and even Lorna clinked her cup against Elias's without spilling a drop. That winter, the house held warmth not just from firewood, but from something deeper, a rhythm made of shared work and quiet touches. Elias repaired the roof over the back room. Prudence finished the dress in time for Christmas Eve. Liam began carving a whistle from a willow branch. Lorna learned to read the first lines of the Bible aloud, her voice unsteady but proud. Come spring, they planted the north field together, seed by seed, row by row. The cradle stood in the corner of the bedroom, not yet needed but ready all the same. One morning in April, Elias brought home a milk cow from a neighbor 3 miles east. They named her Hazel. Lorna brushed her every morning, singing under her breath. By summer's end, the wheat stood tall and gold under a clear Montana sky. And when the harvest came, they gathered it together, woman and man, boy and girl, each hand full, each heart full too. And the house, once leaning and hushed by sorrow, stood strong again, its windows open, its doors wide to the wind. Inside, love did not come in grand declarations or sudden fire. It came like morning light over snow, quiet and certain, warming everything it touched.